Welcome to the Commonwealth Policy Center's Legislative Forum. I'm Richard Nelson, Executive Director of CPC, and today we're going to talk about school choice. A recent survey shows that a majority of Kentuckians are in favor of school choice. And as Americans, we're all in favor of choice in principle, whether it's the food you eat, the kind of car you drive, or where you work. So why not school choice? With me on this program is Andy Vandiver, who is a board member of EdChoice Kentucky, and he's going to share his perspective on school choice. Andy, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, this is super for us to be able to have this conversation about school choice because the legislature is meeting right now. There's just a few days left in the session, but school choice has come up as a hot issue. There are two bills in particular. House Bill 149, which is the Education Opportunity Accounts bill, and then House Bill 563, which is the policy that will allow public school students to choose which public school they go to. Mm-hmm. But both of these bills are being considered soon, and yet there's some resistance that we're seeing towards not just these bills, but school choice in general. And I'd like to, before we get into the meat and the nuts and bolts of those bills, I'd like us to talk about just school choice in principle.
Sure.
I'd like to hear your perspective, because you come at it from a couple of different angles. You're a dad. Mm-hmm. You've got 3 kids.
Yes.
And so you come at it from that perspective, but also as a leader in the Catholic Conference of Kentucky. You have a number of Catholic schools that where choice is a reality, where Catholic parishioners can send their kids to the Catholic schools. But then also as a member of EdChoice Kentucky, you have a coalition of people who are in favor of choice across the state. But I'd like us to talk a little bit about the idea of choice in general.
Sure. So I guess the simplest explanation I can give as to what educational choice is just the idea that families should be able to send their children to whatever school or homeschool, or however you want to say it, the education that works best for their kids, and then cost isn't really a factor. Yeah. Because that's the biggest barrier right now is money. Families that have resources can send their kids to the schools that work for them, but families without resources often just have their assigned public school district is their only choice, whether it works for them or not.
So school choice is essentially what I'm hearing from you. It empowers parents.
Yes.
Those who cannot afford to send their kids to the private school, or whether it's secular or a religious school. But do we have any idea how many people might take advantage of a school choice option if it was easier for the middle to low income parents to send their kids to the school of their choice? And where I'm getting to, let me look at it from this angle. You know, one of the big arguments, Andy, against school choice is that if you allow middle to low income parents to send their kids to the school that's the best fit, to give them a true choice, it might drain the public schools. There will be less students going to the public schools, and it will drain resources from the public schools. And one of the concerns is that it could negatively impact existing public schools. Is that a valid argument?
It's not. And to address your first question about how much people desire a non-public school option, we did a poll in August of 2020 and found that roughly about 50% of Kentuckians would like to have non-public schools as a choice if cost was not a factor. So there is a huge number. Sometimes you'll hear opponents say, well, 90% of students in Kentucky go to public schools, therefore we shouldn't do school choice because families don't really want these other options. Families do want other options. Now, when you look at House Bill 149, we've had estimates that might help around 7,000 kids, depending on how the program rolls out and how it's passed. It's a $25 million program. And to give you perspective, there's about 700,000 kids in school in Kentucky now. So, I mean, it's a relatively small number. A lot of folks think it's not big enough. But what I say is we got to walk before we run. This will be a good start to giving families more choices. As far as how it's gone, I think Florida is probably one of the best examples you can think of. So Florida has more choice than just about any state in the country. They have over 100,000 kids in their scholarship tax credit program. and the public schools are doing great in Florida. And the example I like to give there specifically is Florida 20 years ago. The joke was that they should call it Flor-duh, because they just academically, their students were not doing well. Really? They were around the bottom of the country. So you had, from the last 20 years, there were reforms within the public schools. At the same time, they passed school choice, and they expanded choice, and at the same time, public school outcomes went up. And it's really about getting kids in the place that's going to fit best for them.
So Florida has had school choice for several years, and it did not drain resources from the public schools. It sounds like it actually improved the public schools. Do we know of any situations, though, where an inordinate number of students did leave a public school to cause significant teachers to lose their jobs or significant resources for a particular school where they couldn't continue on? Are we aware of any cases like that?
The way I talk about it, this is not something that's really disruptive. These programs generally grow fairly slowly over time. So in Kentucky, this would not be something overnight. You'd have this mass exodus from the public schools. And I always say, if a public school is working for a child, parents aren't likely to switch them out of that school. It's really the kids where it's not quite working for them, or the parents just desire something else. The other thing to keep in mind is when a student leaves a public school, that doesn't mean they automatically lose the money for that child. Property taxes are not based on enrollment. So the public school district, whether they're educating 1,000 kids or 10,000 kids, they still keep the local property tax dollars. State funding's a little bit different, but even that, it's not going to be disruptive to public schools to have a choice.
Let's talk about the areas of Kentucky and the families in those areas that would most benefit from school choice, because there are many school districts that are doing well and where they don't have to. They're doing well enough where there's not complaints from the parents, or they don't feel like there's a good choice for their child. Tell us about the school districts in Kentucky that and the parents that would benefit in those districts from school choice options.
Sure. So it really is broad. We have schools and coalition members from all over the state. Some people think this is just a Louisville issue, or this is just a Northern Kentucky issue, where there's a lot of private schools. But what they don't know is we have, I think it's around 300, 400 private schools in the state. I'm mixed up the number a little bit, but it's several hundred, a lot more than what you would think. We have 70,000 non-public school students in the state, and they're really spread out all over the place. And as far as what type of schools, a lot of times there's focus on these schools that maybe are low-performing public schools, and we need to get kids choice there. But the reality is, your child could be in the best public school district there is, but it may not be working for them academically, socially. Maybe there's bullying.
Sure.
And so we don't want to just assume this is something for schools that aren't doing well. This is something for really, it's about the students and their performance and their needs, and it's about the parents having a choice.
So if a parent thought that homeschooling for a particular season in their child's life was better, they could pull their child out of the public school and homeschool. And there would be some kind of assistance through the 149. We're going to get into that in a little further. What I was getting to is that it seems that the school choice movement has started, particularly from Louisville, the west end of Louisville, where there are kids trapped in failing schools, where the graduation rates are very low, where academically they're not performing well, and where parents in those communities are demanding choice for their children. Tell us a little bit about, if you could, what is happening in some of the schools in the west end of Louisville. Are you aware of some of the numbers? I'm speaking in generalities, and I'm not up on the latest numbers, but Andy, a couple years ago, I was aware of some numbers that just floored me. Yeah. That if I was forced to send my kids to that school, I couldn't do it. And look, this is not to diminish those public school teachers who are pouring their hearts out in the lives of the kids, or those administrators who are trying to do a good job. But as a parent, you want what's best for your kid. And that their child's future is at stake. So tell us what you're aware of in the West End and Louisville in particular.
So I don't have the particular numbers in front of me, but I know there's just huge rates of students who can't read. In third grade levels, they can't read. They're just incredibly behind. And I think the scary thing, while I can't tell you specific numbers, I can tell you we've been aware of this problem for a long time, and over the last decade, we have not improved. Despite all the different things that have been tried, we're not doing better, and that's why we think that choice may not be, it's not a silver bullet, it's not going to solve all our problems, but we got to start thinking about doing stuff differently than we have. And it's not, and like I said, it's not just about Louisville. Louisville does have a lot of scary academic results, particularly in the West End, as far as student performance and particularly black student performance, it's not getting better. But you look statewide, Kentucky is just not seeing the improvement we should be, across the board.
Kentucky has lagged behind when it comes to test scores. Unfortunately, we've been towards the bottom when it comes to reading levels for, I want to say, 4th graders, 8th graders. When you look at the NAAP, I believe it is, we're lagging behind states around us and nationally. And I think one thing we can agree on across the spectrum, doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, pro-public schools or not, I think that we all want what's best for our kids. We all want to support those structures that are going to nurture and train our kids and give them a good education. Absolutely. I think that's a starting point we can agree on. How we get to that end result, now that's a different question. Andy, I want to pause for just a moment and let the viewers know that there are 2 bills in the legislature. I mentioned them earlier. House Bill 149, the Educational Opportunity Accounts Bill, and then House Bill 563, which allows parents who have kids in public schools to choose which public schools they send their kids to. And these bills are being heard in a legislative committee this Thursday. And if you care about school choice, and if you want to make a difference, call your legislator at 800-372-7181 and ask them to support the school choice bills, House Bill 149 and House Bill 563. Again, call 800-372-7181 and ask them to support the school choice legislation. Change will not happen unless citizens get involved, unless parents let their voices be heard. And when you leave that message, be respectful, be brief, don't be negative. But legislators do need to hear from you. In fact, they want to hear from you. So call 800-372-7181. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner! Go?
Excellent. Soccer is fun. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the family.
Yeah!
I thought you were on my team.
Hi, Richard Nelson here with the Commonwealth Policy Center. If you're feeling frustrated over the direction of our nation, the leadership in Washington, D.C., the Equality Act, don't stay in your frustration. Do something about it. Get plugged into the Commonwealth Policy Center. Go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. Be informed, be encouraged, sign up now. Go to commonwealthpolicycenter.org. Welcome back to the Commonwealth Policy Center's Legislative Forum. I'm here with Andy Vandiver, and we are talking educational choice. And Andy, we had talked in the first segment about a survey that was done indicating the level of interest in Kentucky with EdChoice. And tell us what that survey found in Kentucky.
Sure. So we did a public opinion poll the first week of February and we described what is an education opportunity account. So it's a program that provides families with financial resources so they can send their kid to a non-public school, get tutoring services, special needs services, explain the whole bill in a very objective fashion. And what we found is 63% of Kentuckians would support such a program. When you break out among parties, 74% of Republicans, 65% of independents, and 53% of Democrats. So it's popular across the board. And the other half of that is opposition is something 20, 30%. So, I mean, this is a overwhelmingly popular issue.
So this is embraced across the political spectrum. Where's the largest opposition coming from? So Democrats, Republicans, and independents are in favor of it. Where's that 20 to 30% of strong opposition coming from?
Well, I can tell you the groups that are opposed to it. The KEA is one group. Unfortunately, the public school superintendents is another. And I think more than anything, it's about fear of change. When you describe the program to them, a lot of folks aren't really that concerned about it. They think it makes sense. But then, unfortunately, I think what happens is folks just, get so stuck on, well, this is the way we've always done things. And if we change things, I'm worried about change. But what we know is these programs work in other states. So it's a lot of the opposition is coming up with hypotheticals about this is going to be bad and it's going to harm public schools. But when you just look across the border at other states that have these programs, public schools are doing well. And the kids that use these programs are doing well. You
had told me off air about West Virginia and their expansion of school choice. Let's talk about West Virginia.
Yeah, sure. So just to give you an idea, Kentucky is surrounded by school choice states. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Tennessee, Virginia. And now the joke I used to tell people is, well, West Virginia's over there, and we don't want to be in a category with West Virginia. We want to get school choice done first. Well, what's happening in West Virginia, they're very similar. They have 0 school choice programs. They're going to go from 0 to passing the most expansive school choice program in the country. 90% of students in West Virginia will be eligible for this program. It's already been passed out of their House of Representatives, which that was actually the more difficult chamber to get it out of. So the expectation is it will pass.
So is this the Educational Opportunity Account?
It's very similar, but it's funded through taxpayer dollars. So their program actually takes the dollars for all the kids. Kentucky, our Constitution would not allow that type of program. So what we're doing is a program that encourages private donations. And through being private donations, then it does not get into those issues where public dollars will be a problem in Kentucky.
So Kentucky's surrounding states have embraced school choice. West Virginia is going to be the boldest school choice plan in the country, apparently, with public tax dollars that will follow the student to whatever their parents decide for what's best for the child. You'd mentioned also Missouri, I think, came up. Tell us about Missouri's plan.
Yeah, so they're doing something. Their proposal is actually fairly similar to ours. It's a taxpayer or tax credit funded program through private donations. The only difference is we're proposing $25 million. I believe their program is going to be $50 million. So twice as big. And but as far as what it would cover, it'd be very similar. And they're pretty far along in the process. It's gotten out of their House of Representatives.
Okay. So we're seeing Kentucky's surrounding states embrace the idea of school choice. How are they doing academically? How is the school choice states? How are they doing compared to Kentucky?
Doing well. I think that the number of studies, it's always going up every year. But when you look at states with school choice and public school outcomes, I think there's 28 studies, empirical gold standard studies that have been done. And only 2 of them found negative results or even neutral results. The other 26 found positive academic results for students in public schools. Now, when you look at the students participate in the programs, a lot of the outcomes are going up there as well because you're getting that child in a place that's going to work for them.
Okay, so the students are doing well. What about financially? And we touched on this a little bit in the first segment, but are schools being hurt? Because I think that's the strongest talking point against school choice. The argument from the KEA is that you could drain the public school funding. You could hurt local public schools. Is there any evidence out there, again, that shows that is the case, where school choice will hurt public schools?
No. I mean, it's virtually non-existent. And here's the other thing you have to put in perspective. We're not here to knock public schools. You never hear me knock public schools. But the public schools, when you take state, federal, and local tax dollars in Kentucky, they're receiving about $8 billion a year. $8 billion, that's a big number. And we're talking about a $25 million proposal that would grow over time to meet demand, but it's minuscule, the amount of money. And this will be a program that directly funds students. And here's the catch, too. This would also help public school students. This proposal, House Bill 149, would provide aid to public school students as well if those schools want to participate.
So this program, House Bill 149, would allow these educational opportunity accounts to be funded, and it would essentially private entities would put money into a fund, and that would be distributed to the most needy of the students. Those students who are trapped in failing schools, thinking of those in the West End or in other areas where they need help, they need an option. Back in January, the KEA, Kentucky Education Association, spent some $70,000.
Close to 80.
Closer to 80.
Yep.
To defeat this. Why is that?
I tried to get into folks' motives. I mean, they simply oppose the bill.
But what were their strongest talking points? What were they saying?
It's more that this is going to take money away from public schools. I think that is highly misleading. And, just it's an eye-popping number. I mean, when you think about $80,000, they spent more than any other group lobbying the General Assembly. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce was the next highest, and they only spent about half of what the KEA spent in the month of January. And what I tell people is that's intimidating. The idea that a group's throwing $80,000 at an issue is intimidating. But what we have is we don't have the money. We certainly don't have the money that they have. But we do have 74% of Republicans, 65% of independents, and 53% of Democrats that want this bill. And at the end of the day, that's what really should matter, not how much money people can throw at an issue.
What does the EdChoice Kentucky support look like? Supporting House Bill 149, which is a true educational choice bill. What does your coalition look like? What kind of support are you seeing from across the state? Is this just the Catholic denomination that's in favor? Tell us about that coalition.
So we founded EdChoice Kentucky as a joint effort. So I did not grow up Catholic. I grew up in Western Kentucky. And the talking point I kind of brought to the group as to why we needed to form something like EdChoice Kentucky is, Catholics are only a small portion of the population in Kentucky. We have to get our Baptist friends, our Methodist friends, all our Protestant friends, independent Christians. And we have a lot of independent Christian schools. We have some secular private schools. We have some folks that are just not really affiliated with a religious institution, but they just want to make education better, business people. And we also have folks, we have a Jewish school that's part of our coalition. So it's really a broad-based coalition. It's diverse, economically, religious, geographically, all.
That's good that you have a broad-based coalition. And what are you hearing from parents, though? Are you hearing stories from parents that are saying, we need it, we want to help? What kind of support is there from parents?
There is always, stories over the last few years. There's been stories from parents that, I desperately need an option for my child. I think what's happened in the last year is with COVID-19, parents have been hit particularly hard. People have lost jobs. You have single mothers who are trying to, do NTI work and give their kid good education. If only they had the option to go somewhere else, get what their child needed, it would be life-changing for them. And so it's only amped up the need this year.
So House Bill 149 is the bill, the school choice bill, this legislative session. It is now in the Appropriations and Revenue Committee, expected to be heard on Thursday. And a couple of things that this bill does, I'd like to go over it. It would create $25 million. People that have means would donate to an entity that could then distribute it to kids who need an option, who need a choice in school. That money could be used for tuition for PK through 12. It would help kids in NTI, non-traditional instruction. It would allow for tutoring, help tutoring to form a micro school or a pandemic pod, considering the COVID pandemic period that we've been in. It would provide for after-school programs, summer enrichment programs, transportation costs, a whole host of things. I've got a pretty big list here. Therapy for students with special needs. And I think that's something that is worthwhile talking about because we are all different. There's, the whole spectrum of educational learning levels. But then you look at kids who have developmental disabilities or mental disabilities, and the traditional classroom may not be the best for them. Their parents might need some special program, some special areas of development that they may need. And this would provide for that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, every child's unique, and and parents are going to know that best. Parents are going to know best what their individual child's going to need.
Absolutely. So this would also allow for dual credit college courses. So for that bright kid who is maybe a sophomore or junior in high school could do dual enrollment. Let's see, career and technical education. So maybe somebody's on that technical route, and they maybe could take classes at the community college. I'm not sure, but it looks like maybe when they're younger, maybe they're on the homeschool track, and when they're 16, they could go to the community college and learn electrical or plumbing or welding, which is great. And we need a lot of help in those fields, by the way. So who would be eligible for the EOAs? Let's talk about that.
Sure. So it's financially need-based. The current bill, House Bill 149, says you have to be your income has to be less than 200% above reduced lunch, or you have to be a foster student. Now, when I say 200% above reduced lunch, you're talking a family of 4 making $96,000 a year would be at the top eligibility. Now, that family would not be eligible to receive the same amount of aid as somebody making $40,000 a year. The less you make, the more you're eligible to receive because you have more financial need. So it's all based on financial need, and over half the scholarships or half the aid has to go to students below reduced lunch. Okay. So, less than about $50,000 a year for a family of 4.
This is the fascinating thing about House Bill 49. It truly is trying to help the neediest families who really desire something different for their child. It's not anti-public education. As you shared, it is not taking away, it's not going to drastically impact the well-being of the local public school. It's a gradual thing, but it's empowering parents to make a choice that they believe is the best for their child. And Andrew, as we wind down here, I'm thinking that as Kentuckians, we all desire what's best for our children. We all desire what will make for a flourishing, healthy Kentucky, and education is an important part in that dynamic, in that equation. We want to equip kids. We want to educate them as best we can. And giving parents a choice, a true choice, to send their kids to the best school that will be the best fit, that will educate them in the best way, is the way to go. So House Bill 149 and House Bill 563 are being heard in the House A&R Committee this week. If you care about choice, if you care about giving kids a better choice, empowering parents, then I encourage you to call the legislative message line at 800-372-7181. and encourage your legislators to support the school choice legislation at 800-372-7181. Thanks again for tuning in to CPC's Legislative Forum. God bless and enjoy your day.